This is a tale of a meeting of two lonesome, skinny, fairly old white men on a planet which was dying fast. One of them was a science fiction writer named Kilgore Trout. He was a nobody at the time, and he supposed his life was over. He was mistaken. As a consequence of the meeting, he became one of the most beloved and respected human beings in history. The man he met was an automobile dealer, a Pontiac dealer named Dwayne Hoover. Dwayne Hoover was on the brink of going insane. There were 1 quadrillion nations in the universe, but the nation Dwayne Hoover and Kilgore Trout belonged to was the only one with a national anthem which was gibberish sprinkled with question marks. The motto of Dwayne Hoover's and Kilgore Trout's nation was this, which meant in a language nobody spoke anymore, out of many, one, e pluribus unum. If they studied their paper money for clues as to what their country was about, they found, among a lot of other Baroque trash, a picture of a truncated pyramid with a radiant eye on top of it. Not even the President of the United States knew what that was all about. It was as though the country were saying to its citizens, "In nonsense is strength." A lot of the nonsense was the innocent result of playfulness on the part of the founding fathers of the nation of Dwayne Hoover and Kilgore Trout. The founders were aristocrats, and they wished to show off their useless education, which consisted of the study of hocus pocus from ancient times. They were bum poets as well. But some of the nonsense was evil, since it concealed great crimes. For example, teachers of children in the United States of America wrote this date on blackboards again and again and asked the children to memorize it with pride and joy. 1492. The teachers told the children that this was when their continent was discovered by human beings. Actually, millions of human beings were already living full and imaginative lives on the continent in 1492. That was simply the year in which sea pirates began to cheat and rob and kill them. Actually, the sea pirates, who had the most to do with the creation of the new government, owned human slaves. They used human beings for machinery, and even after slavery was eliminated, because it was so embarrassing, they and their descendants continued to think of ordinary human beings as machines. The sea pirates were white. The people who were already on the continent when the pirates arrived were copper-colored. When slavery was introduced onto the continent, the slaves were black. Color was everything. When Dwayne Hoover and Kilgore Trout met each other, their country was by far the richest and the most powerful country on the planet. It had most of the food and minerals and machinery, and it disciplined other countries by threatening to shoot big rockets at them or to drop things on them from airplanes. Most other countries didn't have doodly squat. Many of them weren't even inhabitable anymore. They had too many people and not enough space. They had sold everything that was any good, and there wasn't anything left to eat anymore, and still the people went on fucking all the time. Fucking was how babies were made. Everybody in America was supposed to grab whatever he could and hold on to it. Some Americans were very good at grabbing and holding, were fabulously well-to-do. Others couldn't get their hands on doodly squat. Dwayne Hoover was fabulously well-to-do when he met Kilgore Trout. A man whispered those exact words to a friend one morning as Dwayne walked by. Fabulously well-to-do. And here's how much of the planet Kilgore Trout owned in those days. Doodly squat. And Kilgore Trout and Dwayne Hoover met in Midland City, which was Dwayne's hometown, during the Arts Festival there in the autumn of 1972. As has already been said, Dwayne was a Pontiac dealer who was going insane. Kilgore Trout became a pioneer in the field of mental health. He advanced his theories disguised as science fiction. He died in 1981, almost 20 years after he made Dwayne Hoover so sick. Dwayne was a widower. He lived alone at night in a dream house in Fairchild Heights, which was the most desirable residential area in the city. Every house there cost at least $100,000 to build. Every house was on at least 4 acres of land. Dwayne's only companion at night was a Labrador retriever named Sparky. Sparky could not wag his tail because of an automobile accident many years ago, so he had no way of telling other dogs how friendly he was. He had to fight all the time. His ears were in tatters. He was lumpy with scars. Dwayne had a black servant named Lottie Davis. She cleaned his house every day. Then she cooked his supper for him and served it. Then she went home. She was descended from slaves. Lottie Davis and Duane didn't talk much, even though they liked each other a lot. Duane reserved most of his conversation for the dog. He would get down on the floor and roll around with Sparky, and he would say things like, "You and me, Spark," and "How's my old buddy," and so on. And that routine went on unrevised even after Duane started to go crazy, so Lottie had nothing unusual to notice. Kilgore Trout owned a parakeet named Bill. Like Duane Hoover, Trout was all alone at night except for his pet. Trout, too, talked to his pet, but while Duane Hoover babbled to his Labrador retriever about love, Trout sneered and muttered to his parakeet about the end of the world. "Any time now," he would say, "and high time, too." It was Trout's theory that the atmosphere would become unbreathable soon. Trout did another thing that some people might have considered eccentric. He called mirrors leaks. It amused him to pretend that mirrors were holes between two universes. If he saw a child near a mirror, he might wag his finger at a child warningly and say with great solemnity, "Don't get too near that leak. You wouldn't want to wind up in the other universe, would you?" Sometimes somebody would say in his presence, "Excuse me, I have to take a leak." This was a way of saying that the speaker intended to drain liquid waste from his body through a valve in his lower abdomen. And Trout would reply waggishly, "Where I come from, that means you're about to steal a mirror," and so on. By the time of Trout's death, of course, everybody called mirrors leaks. That was how respectable even his jokes had become. Trout's employer and co-workers had no idea that he was a writer. No reputable publisher had ever heard of him, for that matter, even though he had written 117 novels and 2,000 short stories by the time he met Duane. He made carbon copies of nothing he wrote. He mailed off manuscripts without enclosing stamped, self-addressed envelopes for their safe return. Sometimes he didn't even include a return address. He got names and addresses of publishers from magazines devoted to the writing business, which he read avidly in the periodical rooms of public libraries. He thus got in touch with a firm called World Classics Library, which published hardcore pornography in Los Angeles, California. They used his stories, which usually didn't even have women in them, to give bulk to books and magazines of salacious pictures. They never told him where or when he might expect to find himself in print. Here is what they paid him. Doodly squat. They didn't even send him complimentary copies of the books and magazines in which he appeared, so he had to search them out in pornography stores. And the titles he gave his stories were often changed. Pan-Galactic Straw Boss, for example, became mouth-crazy. Most distracting to Trout, however, were the illustrations his publishers selected, which had nothing to do with his tales. There had been a time when a copy of Trout's most popular book to date, Plague on Wheels, had brought as much as $12 because of the illustrations. It was now being offered for $1, and people who paid even that much for it did so not because of the pictures. They paid for the words. The words in the book, incidentally, were about life on a dying planet called Lingo 3, whose inhabitants resembled American automobiles. They had wheels. They were powered by internal combustion engines. They ate fossil fuels. They weren't manufactured, though. They reproduced. They laid eggs containing baby automobiles, and the babies matured in pools of oil drained from adult crankcases. Lingo 3 was visited by space travelers who learned that the creatures were becoming extinct for this reason. They had destroyed their planet's resources, including its atmosphere. The space travelers weren't able to offer much in the way of material assistance. The automobile creatures hoped to borrow some oxygen and to have the visitors carry at least one of their eggs to another planet where it might hatch, where an automobile civilization could begin again. But the smallest egg they had was a 48-pounder, and the space travelers themselves were only an inch high, and their spaceship wasn't even as big as an earthling shoebox. They were from Zeltoldamar. The spokesman for the Zeltoldamarians was Kago. Kago said that all he could do was to tell others in the universe about how wonderfully automobile creatures had been. Here is what he said to all those rusting junkers who were out of gas. "You will be gone, but not forgotten." Trout received only one fan letter before 1972. It was from an eccentric millionaire who hired a private detective agency to discover who and where he was. Trout was so invisible that the search cost $18,000. The fan letter came much too late. It wasn't good news. It was perceived as an invasion of privacy by Kilgore Trout. The letter from Rosewater promised that he would make Trout famous. This is what Trout had to say about that, with only his parakeet listening. "Keep the hell out of my body bag." A body bag was a large plastic envelope for a freshly killed American soldier. It was a new invention. I do not know who invented the body bag. I do know who invented Kilgore Trout. I did. And 2 months after Trout received his first fan letter, I had him find in his mailbox an invitation to be a speaker at an arts festival in the American Middle West. The letter was from the festival's chairman, Fred T. Berry. He was respectful, almost reverent about Kilgore Trout. He beseeched him to become one of several distinguished out-of-town participants in the festival, which would last for 5 days. It would celebrate the opening of the Mildred Berry Memorial Center for the Arts in Midland City. Fred T. Berry confessed in his letter that he had not read the works of Kilgore Trout, but that he would joyfully do so before the festival began. "You came highly recommended by Elliot Rosewater," he said, "who assures me that you are perhaps the greatest living American novelist. There can be no higher praise than that." Clipped to the letter was a check for $1,000. Fred T. Berry explained that that was for travel expenses and an honorarium. It was a lot of money. Trout was suddenly fabulously well-to-do. Trout accepted the invitation. 2 days before the festival was to begin, he delivered Bill into the care of his landlady upstairs, and he hitchhiked to New York City with $500 pinned to the inside of his underpants. The rest of the money he had put in a bank. Dwayne Hoover wasn't all that weird before he met Kilgore Trout. His behavior in public kept him well within the limits of acceptable acts and beliefs and conversations in Midland City. The person closest to him, Francine Pefko, his white secretary and mistress, said that Dwayne seemed to be getting happier and happier all the time during the month before Dwayne went public as a maniac. "I kept thinking," she told a newspaper reporter from her hospital bed, "he is finally getting over his wife's suicide." Francine worked at Dwayne's principal place of business, which was Dwayne Hoover's Exit 11 Pontiac Village, just off the interstate, next door to the new Holiday Inn. The only person who said out loud that Dwayne was going crazy was Dwayne's white sales manager at the Pontiac agency, who was Harry LeSabre. A full week before Dwayne went off his rocker, Harry said to Francine Pefko, "Something has come over Dwayne. He used to be so charming. I don't find him so charming anymore." Harry knew Dwayne better than did any other man. He had been with Dwayne for 20 years. He came to work for him when the agency was right on the edge of the nigger part of town. A nigger was a human being who was black. Here is where Dwayne got the money to buy the agency. He borrowed it from the Midland County National Bank. For collateral, he put up stock he owned in a company which was then called the Midland City Ordnance Company. It later became Barrytron Limited. When Dwayne first got the stock in the depths of the Great Depression, the company was called the Robo-Magic Corporation of America. The name of the company kept changing through the years because the nature of its business changed so much, but its management hung on to the company's original motto, "For old time's sake." The motto was this: "Goodbye, Blue Monday." The motto of the old Robo-Magic washing machine cleverly confused two separate ideas people had about Monday. One idea was that women traditionally did their laundry on Monday. Monday was simply wash day, and not an especially depressing day on that account. People who had horrible jobs during the week used to call Monday Blue Monday sometimes, though, because they hated to return to work after a day of rest. When Fred T. Berry made up the Robo-Magic motto as a young man, he pretended that Monday was called Blue Monday because doing the laundry disgusted and exhausted women. The Robo-Magic was going to cheer them up. Here is the scene between Harry and Dwayne which upset Harry so much. Harry went into Dwayne's office right after Vernon left. He expected no trouble because he had never had any serious trouble with Dwayne. "How's my old combat buddy today?" he said to Dwayne. "As good as can be expected," said Dwayne. "Anything special bothering you?" "No," said Harry. "Vern's wife thinks Vern is trying to turn her brains into plutonium," said Dwayne. "What's plutonium?" said Harry, and so on. They rambled along, and Harry made up a problem for himself just to keep the conversation lively. He said he was sad sometimes that he had no children. "But I'm glad in a way, too," he went on. "I mean, why should I contribute to overpopulation?" Dwayne didn't say anything. "Maybe we should have adopted one," said Harry, "but it's too late now, and the old lady and me, we have a good time just horsing around with ourselves. What do we need a kid for?" It was after the mention of adoption that Duane blew up. He himself had been adopted by a couple who had moved to Midland City from West Virginia in order to make big money as factory workers in the First World War. Duane's real mother was a spinster schoolteacher who wrote sentimental poetry and claimed to be descended from Richard the Lionhearted, who was a king. His real father was an itinerant typesetter who seduced his mother by setting her poems in type. He didn't sneak them into the newspaper or anything. It was enough for her that they were set in type. She was a defective childbearing machine. She destroyed herself automatically by giving birth to Duane. The printer disappeared. He was a disappearing machine. It may be that the subject of adoption caused an unfortunate chemical reaction in Duane's head. At any rate, Duane suddenly snarled this at Harry. "Harry, why don't you get a bunch of cotton waste from Vern Gar, soak it in blue Sunoco, and burn up your fucking wardrobe? You make me feel like I'm at Watson Brothers." Watson Brothers was the name of the funeral parlor for white people who were at least moderately well-to-do. Blue Sunoco was a brand of gasoline. Harry was startled, and then pain set in. Duane had never said anything about his clothes in all the years he'd known him. The clothes were conservative and neat, in Harry's opinion. His shirts were white, his ties were black or navy blue, his suits were gray or dark blue, his shoes and socks were black. "Listen, Harry," said Duane, and his expression was mean. "Hawaiian Week is coming up, and I'm absolutely serious. Burn your clothes and get new ones, or apply for work at Watson Brothers. Have yourself embalmed while you're at it." Harry couldn't do anything but let his mouth hang open. The Hawaiian Week Duane had mentioned was a sales promotion scheme which involved making the agency look as much like the Hawaiian Islands as possible. People who bought new or used cars or had repairs done in excess of $500 during the week would be entered automatically in a lottery. 3 lucky people would each win a free, all-expenses-paid trip to Las Vegas and San Francisco and then Hawaii for a party of 2. "I don't mind that you have the name of a Buick, Harry, when you're supposed to be selling Pontiacs," Duane went on. He was referring to the fact that the Buick division of General Motors put out a model called LeSabre. "You can't help that." Duane now patted the top of his desk softly. This was somehow more menacing than if he had pounded the desk with his fist. "But there are a hell of a lot of things you can change, Harry. There's a long weekend coming up. I expect to see some big changes in you when I come back to work on Tuesday morning." The weekend was extra long because the coming Monday was a national holiday, Veterans Day. It was in honor of people who had served their country in uniform. "When we started selling Pontiacs, Harry," said Duane, "the car was sensible transportation for school teachers and grandmothers and maiden aunts." This was true. "Perhaps you haven't noticed, Harry, but the Pontiac has now become a glamorous, youthful adventure for people who want to get a kick out of life, and you dress and act like this was a mortuary. Look at yourself in the mirror, Harry, and ask yourself, who could ever associate a man like this with a Pontiac?" Harry LeSabre was too choked up to point out to Duane that no matter what he looked like, he was generally acknowledged to be one of the most effective sales managers for Pontiac, not only in the state but in the entire Middle West. Pontiac was the best-selling automobile in the Midland City area, despite the fact that it was not a low-priced car. It was a medium-priced car. Duane Hoover told poor Harry LeSabre that the Hawaiian Festival, only a long weekend away, was Harry's golden opportunity to loosen up, to have some fun, to encourage other people to have some fun too. "Harry," said Duane, "I have some news for you. Modern science has given us a whole lot of wonderful new colors, with strange, exciting names like red, orange, green, and pink. Harry, we're not stuck anymore with just black, gray, and white." "Isn't that good news, Harry? And the state legislature has just announced that it is no longer a crime to smile during working hours, Harry. And I give you the personal promise of the governor that never again will anybody be sent to the sexual offenders wing of the adult correctional institution for telling a joke." Harry LeSabre might have weathered this all with only minor damage if only Harry hadn't been a secret transvestite. On weekends he liked to dress up in women's clothing, and not drab clothing either. Harry and his wife would pull down the window blinds, and Harry would turn into a bird of paradise. Nobody but Harry's wife knew his secret. Harry and his wife had spent all weekend arguing about whether or not Duane suspected that Harry was a transvestite. They concluded that Duane had no reason to suspect it. Harry had never talked about women's clothes with Duane. He had never entered a transvestite beauty contest or done what a lot of transvestites in Midland City did, which was to join a big transvestite club over in Cincinnati. He never went into the city's transvestite bar, which was Ye Old Rat's Keller in the basement of the Fairchild Hotel. He had never exchanged Polaroid pictures with any other transvestites, had never subscribed to a transvestite magazine. Harry and his wife concluded that Duane had meant nothing more than what he said, that Harry had better put on some wild clothes for Hawaiian Week or Duane would can him. So here was the new Harry now, rosy with fear and excitement. He felt uninhibited and beautiful and lovable and suddenly free. He greeted Duane with the Hawaiian word, which meant both hello and goodbye. Aloha, he said. Kilgore Trout was far away, but he was steadily closing the distance between himself and Duane. He was still in the truck named Pyramid. It was crossing a bridge named in honor of the poet Walt Whitman. The bridge was veiled in smoke. The truck was about to become a part of Philadelphia now. A sign at the foot of the bridge said this: "You are now entering the city of brotherly love." The governor of New York, Nelson Rockefeller, shook Trout's hand in a grocery store one time. Trout had no idea who he was. As a science fiction writer, he should have been flabbergasted to come so close to such a man. Rockefeller wasn't merely governor. Because of the peculiar laws in that part of the planet, Rockefeller was allowed to own vast areas of the Earth's surface, and the petroleum and other valuable materials underneath the surface as well. He owned or controlled more of the planet than many nations. This had been his destiny since infancy. He had been born into that cockamamie proprietorship. "How's it going, fella?" Governor Rockefeller asked Trout. "About the same," said Kilgore Trout. When Duane Hoover saw Harry LeSabre, his sales manager, in leaf-green leotards and a grass skirt and all that, he could not believe it, so he made himself not see it. He leaned on Francine Pefko's desk. He came close to telling her how sick he was. He warned her, "This is a very tough day for some reason, so no jokes, no surprises. Keep everything simple. Keep anybody the least bit nutty out of here. No telephone calls." Francine told Duane that the twins were waiting for him in the inner office. "Something bad is happening at the cave, I think," she told him. Duane was grateful for a message that simple and clear. The twins were his younger stepbrothers, Lyle and Kyle Hoover. The cave was Sacred Miracle Cave, a tourist trap just south of Shepherdstown, which Duane owned in partnership with Lyle and Kyle. It was the sole source of income for Lyle and Kyle, who lived in identical yellow ranch houses on either side of the gift shop, which sheltered the entrance to the cave. All over the state, nailed to trees and fence posts, were arrow-shaped signs which pointed in the direction of the cave and said how far away it was. For example, "Visit Sacred Miracle Cave, 52 miles." Lyle and Kyle sat side by side on the black leather couch in Duane Hoover's inner office. They looked so much alike that Duane had not been able to tell them apart until 1954, when Lyle got in a fight over a woman at the roller derby. After that, Lyle was the one with the broken nose. As babies in a crib, Duane remembered now, they used to suck each other's thumbs. Duane was so glad to see them now. These two little men in overalls and work shoes, each wearing a pork pie hat, they were familiar. They were real. Duane closed his door on the chaos outside. "All right," he said, "what's happened at the cave?" Ever since Lyle had had his nose broken, the twins agreed that Lyle should do the talking for the two. Kyle hadn't said 1,000 words since 1954. "Them bubbles is halfway up to the cathedral now," said Lyle. "The way they're coming, they'll be up to the Moby Dick in a week or two." Duane understood him perfectly. The underground stream, which passed through the bowels of Sacred Miracle Cave, was polluted by some sort of industrial waste which formed bubbles as tough as ping-pong balls. These bubbles were shouldering one another up a passage which led to a big boulder which had been painted white to resemble Moby Dick, the great white whale. The bubbles would soon engulf Moby Dick and invade the Cathedral of Whispers, which was the main attraction at the cave. Thousands of people had been married in the Cathedral of Whispers, including Duane and Lyle and Kyle, Harry LeSabre, too. Lyle told Duane about an experiment he and Kyle had performed the night before. They'd gone into the cave with their identical Browning automatic shotguns, and they'd opened fire on the advancing wall of bubbles. They'd let loose a stink you wouldn't believe, said Lyle. He said it smelled like athlete's foot. It drove me and Kyle right out of there. We run the ventilating system for an hour, and then we went back in. The paint was blistered on Moby Dick. He ain't even got eyes anymore. Moby Dick used to have long-lasting blue eyes as big as dinner plates. The organ turned black and the ceiling turned kind of a dirty yellow, said Lyle. You can hardly see the sacred miracle no more. The organ was the pipe organ of the gods, a thicket of stalactites and stalagmites which had grown together in one corner of the cathedral. There was a loudspeaker in back of it, through which music for weddings and funerals was played. It was illuminated by electric lights, which changed colors all the time. The sacred miracle was a cross in the ceiling of the cathedral. It was formed by the intersection of two cracks. It never was real easy to see, said Lyle, speaking of the cross. I ain't even sure it's there anymore. He asked Dwayne's permission to order a load of cement. He wanted to plug up the passage between the stream and the cathedral. Just forget about Moby Dick and Jesse James and the slaves and all that, said Lyle, and save the cathedral. Jesse James was a skeleton which Dwayne's stepfather had bought from the estate of a doctor back during the Great Depression. The bones of its right hand mingled with the rusted parts of a .45 caliber revolver. Tourists were told that it had been found that way, that it probably belonged to some railroad robber who had been trapped in the cave by a rock slide. As for the slaves, these were plaster statues of black men in a chamber 50 feet down the corridor from Jesse James. The statues were removing one another's chains with hammers and hacksaws. Tourists were told that real slaves had at one time used the cave after escaping to freedom across the Ohio River. The story about the slaves was as fake as the one about Jesse James. The cave wasn't discovered until 1937 when a small earthquake opened up a crack. Dwayne Hoover himself discovered the crack, and then he and his stepfather opened it up with crowbars and dynamite. Before that, not even small animals had been in there. The only connection the cave had with slavery was this. The farm on which it was discovered was started by an ex-slave, Josephus Hubler. He was freed by his master, and he came north and started the farm. Then he went back and bought his mother and a woman who became his wife. Their descendants continued to run the farm until the Great Depression, when the Midland County Merchants Bank foreclosed on the mortgage. And then Dwayne's stepfather was hit by an automobile driven by a white man who had bought the farm. In an out-of-court settlement for his injuries, Dwayne's stepfather was given what he called contemptuously a goddamn nigger farm. Dwayne remembered the first trip the family took to see it. His father ripped a nigger sign off the nigger mailbox and he threw it in a ditch. Here's what it said: Bluebird Farm. Dwayne Hoover got through lunch all right that day. He remembered now about Hawaiian Week. The ukuleles and so on were no longer mysterious. The pavement between his automobile agency and the new Holiday Inn was no longer a trampoline. He had a hamburger and French fries and a Coke at his newest burger chef, which was out on Crestview Avenue, across the street from where the new John F. Kennedy High School was going up. John F. Kennedy had never been in Midland City, but he was a president of the United States who was shot to death. Presidents of the country were often shot to death. The assassins were confused by some of the same bad chemicals which troubled Dwayne. Dwayne's waitress at the burger chef was a 17-year-old white girl named Patty Keene. Her hair was yellow, her eyes were blue. She was very old for a mammal. Most mammals were senile or dead by the time they were 17, but Patty was a sort of mammal which developed very slowly, so the body she rode around in was only now mature. She was a brand-new adult who was working in order to pay off the tremendous doctors and hospital bills her father had run up in the process of dying of cancer of the colon and then cancer of the everything. This was in a country where everybody was expected to pay his own bills for everything, and one of the most expensive things a person could do was to get sick. Patty Keene's father's sickness cost 10 times as much as all the trips to Hawaii, which Dwayne was going to give away at the end of Hawaiian Week. Dwayne appreciated Patty Keene's brand newness, even though he was not sexually attracted to women that young. She was like a new automobile, which hadn't even had its radio turned on yet. And Dwayne was reminded of a ditty his father used to sing sometimes when his father was drunk. It went like this: Roses are red and ready for plucking. You're 16 and ready for high school. Patty Keene was stupid on purpose, which was the case with most women in Midland City. The women all had big minds because they were big animals, but they did not use them much for this reason. Unusual ideas could make enemies, and the women, if they were going to achieve any sort of comfort and safety, needed all the friends they could get. So in the interest of survival, they trained themselves to be agreeing machines instead of thinking machines. All their minds had to do was to discover what other people were thinking, and then they thought that too. When Dwayne left Patty Keene and his burger chef, when he got into his demonstrator and drove away, Patty Keene was persuaded that she could make him happy with her young body, with her bravery and her cheerfulness. She wanted to cry about the lines in his face and the fact that his wife had eaten Drano and his dog had to fight all the time because it couldn't wag his tail, about the fact that his son was a homosexual. She knew all those things about Dwayne. Everybody knew those things about Dwayne. She gazed at the tower of radio station WMCY, which Dwayne Hoover owned. It was the tallest structure in Midland City. It was 8 times as tall as the tombstone of George Hickman Bannister. It had a red light on top of it to keep airplanes away. She thought about all the new and used cars Dwayne Hoover owned. Bunny Hoover, Dwayne's homosexual son, was dressing for work now. He was a piano player in the cocktail lounge of the new Holiday Inn. He was poor. He lived alone in a room without bath in the old Fairchild Hotel, which used to be fashionable. It was a flop house now in the most dangerous part of Midland City. Very soon, Bunny Hoover would be seriously injured by Dwayne, who would soon share an ambulance with Kilgore Trout. Bunny was pale, the same unhealthy color of the blind fish that used to live in the bowels of Sacred Miracle Cave. Bunny avoided the sunshine, too, and the water from the taps of Midland City was becoming more poisonous every day. He ate very little. He prepared his own food in his room. The preparation was simple, since vegetables and fruits were all he ate, and he munched them raw. He not only did without dead meat, he did without living meat, too, without friends or lovers or pets. He had once been highly popular. When he was at Prairie Military Academy, for instance, the student body was unanimous in electing him cadet colonel, the highest rank possible, in his senior year. The Galaxy in which Kilgore Trout was a passenger was on the interstate now, close to Midland City. It was creeping. It was trapped in rush-hour traffic from Barrytron and Western Electric and Prairie Mutual. Trout looked up from his reading, saw a billboard which said this: "Turn back, you have just passed Sacred Miracle Cave." So Sacred Miracle Cave had become a part of the past. As an old man, Trout would be asked by Dr. Thor Lembrig, the Secretary General of the United Nations, if he feared the future. He would give this reply: "Mr. Secretary General, it is the past which scares the bejesus out of me." Dwayne Hoover was only 4 miles away. He was sitting alone on a zebra-skin banquette in the cocktail lounge of the new Holiday Inn. It was dark in there, and quiet, too. The glare and uproar of rush-hour traffic on the interstate was blocked out by thick drapes of crimson velvet. On each table was a hurricane lamp with a candle inside, although the air was still. Bunny Hoover was controlling the piano. He had not looked up when his father came in. Neither had his father glanced in his direction. They had not exchanged greetings for many years. Bunny went on playing his white man's blues. They were slow and tinkling, with capricious silences here and there. Bunny's blues had some of the qualities of a music box, a tired music box. They tinkled, stopped, then reluctantly, torpidly, they managed a few tinkles more. Bunny's mother used to collect tinkling music boxes, among other things. "Give me a black and white and water," the waitress said. That particular drink wasn't for any ordinary person. That drink was for the person who created all of Dwayne's misery to date, who could kill him or make him a millionaire or send him back to prison or do whatever he damn pleased with Dwayne. That drink was for the author, that drink was for me. "This is a very bad book you're writing," I said to myself behind my dark glasses. "I know," I said. "You're afraid you'll kill yourself the way your mother did," I said. "I know," I said. I sat there in a cocktail lounge of my own invention, and I stared through my dark glasses at a white cocktail waitress of my own invention. I named her Bonnie McMahon. I had her bring Dwayne Hoover his customary drink, which was a House of Lords martini with a twist of lemon peel. She was a long-time acquaintance of Dwayne's. Her husband was a guard in the sexual offenders wing of the Adult Correctional Institution. Bonnie had to work as a waitress because her husband lost all their money by investing it in a car wash in Shepherdstown. Dwayne had advised them not to do it. Here's how Dwayne knew her and her husband, Ralph. They had bought 9 Pontiacs from him over the past 16 years. "We're a Pontiac family," they'd say. Bonnie made a joke now as she served him his martini. She made the same joke every time she served anybody a martini. "Breakfast of champions," she said. The expression breakfast of champions is a registered trademark of General Mills Incorporated for use on a breakfast cereal product. The use of the identical expression as the title for this book, as well as throughout the book, is not intended to indicate an association with or sponsorship by General Mills, nor is it intended to disparage their fine products. As for the future I might have predicted for the waitress, this was it. You will be swindled by termite exterminators and not even know it. You will buy steel-belted radial tires for the front wheels of your car. Your cat will be killed by a motorcyclist named Headley Thomas, and you will get another cat. Arthur, your brother in Atlanta, will find $11 in a taxicab. I might have told Bunny Hoover's fortune, too. Your father will become extremely ill, and you will respond so grotesquely that there will be talk of putting you in the booby hatch, too. You will stage scenes in the hospital waiting room, telling doctors and nurses that you are to blame for your father's disease. You will blame yourself for trying for so many years to kill him with hatred. You will redirect your hatred. You will hate your mom, and so on. And it was time now for me to have Rabo Karabekhian, the minimalist painter, and Beatrice Kiesler, the novelist, say and do some stuff for the sake of this book. I did not want to spook them by staring at them as I worked their controls, so I pretended to be absorbed in drawing pictures on my tabletop with a damp fingertip. I made an invisible duplicate on my Formica tabletop of a painting by Rabo Karabekhian entitled The Temptation of St. Anthony. My duplicate was a miniature of the real thing, and mine was not in color, but I had captured the picture's form and spirit, too. The original was 20 feet wide and 16 feet high. The field was Hawaiian avocado, a green wall paint manufactured by the O'Hare Paint and Varnish Company in Hellertown, Pennsylvania. The vertical stripe was day-glow orange reflecting tape. Like everybody else in the cocktail lounge, Karabekhian was softening his brain with alcohol. This was a substance produced by a tiny creature called yeast. Yeast organisms ate sugar and excreted alcohol. They killed themselves by destroying their environment with yeast shit. Kilgore Trout once wrote a short story, which was a dialogue between two pieces of yeast. They were discussing the possible purposes of life as they ate sugar and suffocated in their own excrement. Because of their limited intelligence, they never came close to guessing that they were making champagne. So I had Beatrice Kiesler say to Rabo Karabekhian there at the piano bar, "This is a dreadful confession, but I don't even know who St. Anthony was. Who was he, and why should anybody have wanted to tempt him?" "I don't know, and I would hate to find out," said Karabekhian. "You have no use for truth," said Beatrice. "You know what truth is," said Karabekhian. "It's something crazy my neighbor believes. If I want to make friends with him, I ask him what he believes. He tells me, and I say, yeah, ain't it the truth?" I had no respect whatsoever for the creative works of either the painter or the novelist. I thought Karabekhian, with his meaningless pictures, had entered into a conspiracy with billionaires to make the poor people feel stupid. I thought Beatrice Kiesler had joined hands with other old-fashioned storytellers to make people believe that life had leading characters, minor characters, significant details, insignificant details, that it had lessons to be learned, tests to be passed, and a beginning, a middle, and an end. Adapting to chaos there in the cocktail lounge, I now had Bonnie McMahon, who was exactly as important as anybody else in the universe, bring more yeast excrement to Beatrice Kiesler and Karabekhian. Karabekhian's drink was a beef-eater's dry martini with a twist of lemon peel, so Bonnie said to him, "Breakfast of champions." "That's what you said when you brought me my first martini," said Karabekhian. "I say it every time I give anybody a martini," said Bonnie. "Doesn't that get tiresome?" said Karabekhian. "Or maybe that's why people found cities in God-forsaken places like this, so they can make the same jokes over and over again until the bright angel of death stops their mouths with ashes." "I just try to cheer people up," said Bonnie. "If that's a crime, I never heard about it till now. I'll stop saying it from now on. I beg your pardon. I did not mean to give offense." Bonnie detested Karabekhian, but she was as sweet as pie to him. She had a policy of never showing her anger about anything there in the cocktail lounge. The largest part of her income by far came from tips, and the way to get big tips was to smile, smile, smile no matter what. Bonnie had only two goals in life now. She meant to recoup all the money her husband had lost in the car wash in Shepherdstown, and she ached to have steel-belted radial tires for the front wheels of her automobile. Her husband, meanwhile, was at home watching professional golfers on television and getting smashed on yeast excrement. Raybo Karabekian asked Bonnie McMahon to tell him something about the teenage girl on the cover of the program for the Festival of the Arts. This was the only internationally famous human being in Midland City. She was Mary Alice Miller, the women's 200-meter breaststroke champion of the world. She was only 15, said Bonnie. And Bonnie McMahon told Beatrice and Karabekian that Mary Alice's father, who was a member of the parole board out at Shepherdstown, had taught Mary Alice to swim when she was 8 months old, and that he had made her swim at least 4 hours a day, every day, since she was 3. Raybo Karabekian thought this over, and then he said loudly so a lot of people could hear him, "What kind of a man would turn his daughter into an outboard motor?" I had created Raybo Karabekian, and he was, in my opinion, a vain and weak and trashy man, no artist at all. But it is Raybo Karabekian who has made me the serene earthling that I am this day. Listen. "What kind of a man would turn his daughter into an outboard motor?" he said to Bonnie McMahon. Bonnie McMahon blew up. This was the first time she had blown up since she had come to work in the cocktail lounge. Her voice became as unpleasant as the noise of a bandsaw's cutting galvanized tin. It was loud, too. Oh, yeah, she said. Everybody froze. Bunny Hoover stopped playing the piano. Nobody wanted to miss a word. "You don't think much of Mary Alice Miller?" she said. "Well, we don't think much of your painting. I've seen better pictures done by a 5-year-old. Karabekian slid off his bar stool so he could face all those enemies standing up. He certainly surprised me. I expected him to retreat in a hail of olives, maraschino cherries, and lemon rinds. He was majestic up there. "I now give you my word of honor," he said, "that the picture your city has just bought shows everything about life which truly matters, with nothing left out. It is a picture of the awareness of every animal. It is the immaterial core of every animal, the I am to which all messages are sent. It is all that is alive in any of us, in a mouse, in a deer, in a cocktail waitress. It is unwavering and pure, no matter what preposterous adventure may befall us. The sacred picture of St. Anthony alone is one vertical, unwavering band of light. If a cockroach were near him, or a cocktail waitress, the picture would show 2 such bands of light. Our awareness is all that is alive and may be sacred in any of us. Everything else about us is dead machinery. Citizens of Midland City," he said, "I salute you. You have given a home to a masterpiece." Dwayne Hoover, incidentally, wasn't taking any of this in. He was still hypnotized, turned inward. He was off his rocker. He wasn't playing with a full deck of cards. It was now high time, I thought, for Trout to meet Dwayne Hoover, for Dwayne to run amok. Kilgore Trout entered the cocktail lounge. Dwayne Hoover was still mentally absent from activities in the cocktail lounge. He sat like a lump of nose putty, staring at something long ago and far away. Dwayne moved his lips as Trout sat down. He was saying this soundlessly, and it had nothing to do with Trout or me. Goodbye, Blue Monday. The bartender in the cocktail lounge now flicked on the ultraviolet lights in the ceiling. Bonnie McMahon's uniform, since it was impregnated with fluorescent materials, lit up like an electric sign. So did the bartender's jacket and the African masks on the wall. So did Dwayne Hoover's shirt and the shirts of several other men. The reason was this. Those shirts had been laundered in wash-day products which contained fluorescent materials. The idea was to make clothes look brighter in sunlight by making them actually fluorescent. When the same clothes were viewed in a dark room under ultraviolet light, however, they became ridiculously bright. Bunny Hoover's teeth also lit up, since he used a toothpaste containing fluorescent materials, which was supposed to make his smile look brighter in daylight. He grinned now and appeared to have a mouthful of little Christmas tree lights. But the brightest new light in the room by far was the bosom of Kilgore Trout's new evening shirt. Its brilliance twinkled and had depth. It might have been the top of a slumping open sack of radioactive diamonds. But then Trout hunched forward involuntarily, buckling the starched shirt bosom, turning it into a parabolic dish. This made a searchlight of the shirt. Its beam was aimed at Dwayne Hoover. The sudden light roused Dwayne from his trance. He thought perhaps he had died. At any rate, something painless and supernatural was going on. Dwayne smiled trustingly at the holy light. He was ready for anything. And I sat there in the cocktail lounge of the new Holiday Inn, watching Dwayne Hoover stare into the bosom of the shirt of Kilgore Trout. There in the cocktail lounge, Dwayne Hoover's bad chemicals suddenly decided that it was time for Dwayne to demand from Kilgore Trout the secrets of life. "Give me the message," cried Duane. He tottered up from his own banquette, crashed down again next to Trout, throwing off heat like a steam radiator. "The message, please." And here Duane did something extraordinarily unnatural. He did it because I wanted him to. It was something I had ached to have a character do for years and years. Duane did to Trout what the Duchess did to Alice in Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. He rested his chin on poor Trout's shoulder, dug in with his chin. "The message," he said, digging in his chin, digging in his chin. Trout made no reply. He had hoped to get through what little remained of his life without ever having to touch another human being again. Duane's chin on his shoulder was as shattering as buggery to Trout. "Is this it? Is this it?" said Duane, snatching up Trout's novel. "Now it can be told?" "Yes, that's it," croaked Trout. To his tremendous relief, Duane removed his chin from his shoulder. Duane now began to read hungrily, as though starved for print. And the speed-reading course he had taken at the Young Men's Christian Association allowed him to make a perfect pig of himself with pages and words. Duane Hoover got to his feet now, having wolfed down tens of thousands of words of such solipsistic whimsy in 10 minutes or so. He walked stiffly over to the piano bar. What made him stiff was his awe of his own strength and righteousness. He dared not use his full strength in merely walking, for fear of destroying the new Holiday Inn with footfalls. He did not fear for his own life. Trout's book assured him that he had already been killed 23 times. On each occasion, the creator of the universe had patched him up and got him going again. Duane restrained himself in the name of elegance rather than safety. He was going to respond to this new understanding of life with finesse, for an audience of two, himself and his creator. He approached his homosexual son. Bunny saw the trouble coming, supposed it was death. He might have protected himself easily with all the techniques of fighting he had learned in military school, but he chose to meditate instead. He closed his eyes, and his awareness sank into the silence of the unused lobes of his mind. Ray Bocara-Beckian and Beatrice Keedsler and Bonnie McMahon all grabbed Duane now, pulled him away from Bunny. This increased Duane's glee. "Never hit a woman, right?" he said to the creator of the universe. He then socked Beatrice Keedsler on the jaw. He punched Bonnie McMahon in the belly. He honestly believed they were unfeeling machines. There was a map of Duane's rampage in the paper the next morning. The dotted line of his route started in the cocktail lounge, crossed the asphalt to Francine Pefko's office and his automobile agency, doubled back to the new Holiday Inn again, then crossed Sugar Creek in the westbound lane of the interstate to the median divider, which was grass. Duane was subdued on the median divider by 2 state policemen who happened by. Here's what Duane said to the policeman as they cuffed his hands behind his back. "Thank God you're here." Listen, Duane Hoover hurt so many people seriously that a special ambulance known as Martha was called. Martha was a full-size General Motors transcontinental bus, but with the seats removed. There were beds for 36 disaster victims in there, plus a kitchen and a bathroom and an operating room. It had enough food and medical supplies aboard to serve as an independent little hospital for a week without help from the outside world. Its full name was the Martha Simmons Memorial Mobile Disaster Unit, named in honor of the wife of Newbolt Simmons, a county commissioner of public safety. She had died of rabies, contracted from a sick bat she had found clinging to her floor-to-ceiling living room draperies one morning. 2 physicians in the disaster vehicle named Martha were Cyprian Ukwendi of Nigeria and Kashdror Miasma from the infant nation of Bangladesh. Both were parts of the world which were famous from time to time for having the food run out. Both places were specifically mentioned, in fact, in Now It Can Be Told by Kilgore Trout. Duane Hoover read in that book that robots all over the world were constantly running out of fuel and dropping dead while waiting around to test the only free-willed creature in the universe on the off chance that he should appear. Duane Hoover was now hustled aboard Martha through big double doors in the rear just ahead of the engine compartment. Here is what Duane yelled in the ambulance: "Goodbye, Blue Monday." Then it seemed to him that another day had passed on the Virgin Planet, and it was time to yell again. "Not a cough in a carload," he yelled. Kilgore Trout was one of the walking wounded. He was able to climb aboard the Martha without assistance and to choose a place to sit where he would be away from the real emergencies. He had jumped Duane Hoover from behind when Duane dragged Francine Pefko out of Duane's showroom and onto the asphalt. Duane wanted to give her a beating in public, which his bad chemicals made him think she richly deserved, and so on. Trout grabbed him from behind. Trout's right ring finger somehow slipped into Dwayne's mouth, and Dwayne bit off the topmost joint. Dwayne let go of Francine after that, and she slumped to the asphalt. She was unconscious and the most seriously injured of all, and Dwayne went cantering over to the concrete trough by the interstate, and he spat Kilgore Trout's fingertip into Sugar Creek. Kilgore Trout did not choose to lie down in Martha. He settled into a leather bucket seat behind Eddie Key. Key asked him what was the matter with him, and Trout held up his right hand, partly shrouded in a bloody handkerchief. Martha began to move. Kilgore Trout saw a sign he liked a lot. This is what it said: "It is harder to be unhappy when you are eating Craig's ice cream." The people Dwayne had injured so unjustly would sue him so vengefully that he would be rendered destitute. He would become one more withered balloon of an old man in Midland City's Skid Row, which was the neighborhood of the once fashionable Fairchild Hotel. He would be by no means the only drifter of whom it could be truthfully said, "See him? Can you believe it? He doesn't have doodly squat now, but he used to be fabulously well-to-do," and so on. The Midland City Festival of the Arts was postponed because of madness. Fred T. Berry, its chairman, came to the hospital in his limousine dressed like a Chinaman to offer his sympathy to Beatrice Keedsler and Kilgore Trout. Trout could not be found anywhere. Beatrice Keedsler had been put to sleep with morphine. Kilgore Trout assumed that the Arts Festival would still take place that night. He had no money for any form of transportation, so he set out on foot. He began the 5-mile walk down Fairchild Boulevard toward a tiny amber dot at the other end. The dot was the Midland City Center for the Arts. He would make it grow by walking toward it. When his walking had made it big enough it would swallow him up, there would be food inside. I was waiting to intercept Trout about 6 blocks away. I sat in a Plymouth Duster I had rented from Avis with my Diners Club card. I had a paper tube in my mouth. It was stuffed with leaves. I set it on fire. It was a soigné thing to do. "Mr. Trout," I said from the unlighted interior of the car, "you have nothing to fear. I bring you tidings of great joy." "Are you from the Arts Festival?" he said. "I am from the Everything Festival," I replied. "The what?" he said. I thought it would be a good idea to let him have a good look at me, and so attempted to flick on the dome light. I turned on the windshield washers instead. I turned them off again. My view of the lights of the county hospital was garbled by beads of water. I pulled at another switch, and it came away in my hand. It was a cigarette lighter, so I had no choice but to continue to speak from darkness. "Mr. Trout," I said, "I am a novelist, and I created you for use in my books." "Pardon me," he said. "I'm your creator," I said. "You're in the middle of a book right now, close to the end of it, actually." He said. "Are there any questions you would like to ask?" "Pardon me," he said. "Feel free to ask anything you want. About the past, about the future," I said. "There's a Nobel Prize in your future." "A what?" he said. "A Nobel Prize in medicine." "Ha," he said. It was a non-committal sound. "I've also arranged for you to have a reputable publisher from now on. No more Beaver books for you." He said. "If I were in your spot, I would certainly have lots of questions," I said. "Do you have a gun?" he said. I laughed there in the dark, tried to turn on the light again, activated the windshield washer again. "I don't need a gun to control you, Mr. Trout. All I have to do is write down something about you, and that's it." "Are you crazy?" he said. "No," I said, and I shattered his power to doubt me. I transported him to the Taj Mahal, and then to Venice, and then to Dar el Salaam, and then to the surface of the sun where the flames could not consume him, and then back to Midland City again. The poor old man crashed to his knees. He reminded me of the way my mother and Bunny Hoover's mother used to act whenever somebody tried to take their photographs. As he cowered there, I transported him to the Bermuda of his childhood, had him contemplate the infertile egg of a Bermuda urn. I took him from there to the Indianapolis of my childhood. I put him in a circus crowd there. I had him see a man with locomotor ataxia and a woman with a goiter as big as a zucchini. I got out of my rented car. I did it noisily, so his ears would tell him a lot about his creator, even if he was unwilling to use his eyes. I slammed the door firmly. As I approached him from the driver's side of the car, I swiveled my feet some, so that my footsteps were not only deliberate, but gritty, too. I stopped with the tips of my shoes on the rim of the narrow field of his downcast eyes. "Mr. Trout, I love you," I said gently. "I have broken your mind to pieces. I want to make it whole. I want you to feel a wholeness and an inner harmony such as I have never allowed you to feel before. I want you to raise your eye to look at what I have in my hand." I had nothing in my hand, but such was my power over Trout that he would see in it whatever I wished him to see. I might have shown him Helen of Troy, for instance, only 6 inches tall. "Mr. Trout, Kilgore," I said, "I hold in my hand a symbol of wholeness and harmony and nourishment. It is oriental in its simplicity, but we are Americans, Kilgore, and not Chinamen. We Americans require symbols which are richly colored and three-dimensional and juicy. Most of all, we hunger for symbols which have not been poisoned by great sins our nation has committed, such as slavery and genocide and criminal neglect, or by tin-horn commercial greed and cunning. Look up, Mr. Trout," I said, and I waited patiently. "Kilgore?" The old man looked up, and he had my father's wasted face, when my father was a widower, when my father was an old man. He saw that it was an apple in my hand. "I'm approaching my 50th birthday, Mr. Trout," I said. "I'm cleansing and renewing myself for the very different sorts of years to come. Under similar spiritual conditions, Count Tolstoy freed his serfs. Thomas Jefferson freed his slaves. I'm going to set at liberty all the literary characters who have served me so loyally during my writing career. You are the only one I am telling. For the others, tonight will be a night like any other night. Arise, Mr. Trout. You are free. You are free." He arose shamblingly. I might have shaken his hand, but his right hand was injured, so our hands remained dangling at our sides. "Bon voyage," I said. I disappeared. I somersaulted lazily and pleasantly through the void, which is my hiding place when I dematerialize. Trout's cries to me faded as the distance between us increased. His voice was my father's voice. I heard my father, and I saw my mother in the void. My mother stayed far, far away because she had left me a legacy of suicide. A small hand mirror floated by. It was a leak with a mother-of-pearl handle and frame. I captured it easily, held it up to my own right eye. Here was what Kilgore Trout cried out to me in my father's voice. "Make me young. Make me young. Make me young."